Hey everyone, and thanks for checking out this video. Today we're in Toledo, Ohio, and behind me are the CSX coal and iron docks. Now we're talking winter layup and the boats of the Great Lakes. So we're going to see about 24 freighters between here and Ashtabula on Lake Erie. Now I'll talk a little bit about each vessel and a little history of it. You'll also hear from well-known boat photographer Roger LeLievre. Now it's cold out here, so let's get to looking at some boats. We'll start by flying over the frozen Menominee River toward the CSX coal dock. We'll check out the boats in no particular order other than how I recorded them. If you just want to see some boats and want to skip this narration, there will be a companion video that's already published for you to check out. Click the link in the description for that video. There is a lot more footage in the companion video if you want to check that out. We find the Edwin H, Gott, the American Spirit, and the articulated tug and barge, the Joyce Van Enkevort, and the Great Lakes Trader. Before we take a closer look at those boats, I spotted this little work barge, the Norman G. Looks like they're replacing or maybe adding some of the retaining wall on the coal dock. Alright, from left to right we have the Michigan Trader barge with the Dirk and then Laura Van Enkevort tugs behind. Now the Laura has been in long-term layup since September of 2023. Then we have the Great Republic. The Edwin H. Gott is closest to us with the American Spirit behind her. And the Great Lakes Trader and Joyce Van Enkevort are on the right-hand side of the screen. Here's a little bit about the Great Republic. The 634-foot or 193-meter boat was built in 1981 in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. It features bow and stern thrusters and was touted as the most maneuverable vessel in the world at the time it was constructed. It was designed with the Cuyahoga River in mind, with the intention of shuttling taconite pellets from the Lorain pellet terminal to Cleveland and then to the steel facility upriver. The Laura Van Enkevort is behind the Great Republic. The tug began life in 1994 as the Sydney Candies. After several acquisitions over the following years, she was eventually purchased by Van Enkevort Tug and Barge in late 2018. Laura was rebuilt the following year and renamed as she entered service on the Great Lakes. She was mated with the Joseph H. Thompson barge. Now that barge was retired in 2023, and since then, Laura has been laid up here in Toledo. Next up is the Michigan Trader barge. The 740-foot or 225-meter vessel was built in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin for Van Enkevort Tug and Barge. It was paired with the tug Dirk Van Enkevort. Now the Michigan Trader was the third barge constructed for the shipping company, the other two being the Great Lakes Trader and the Lakes Contender, now called the Erie Trader. A quick battery change and we're heading back to the docks. Here's a little bit about Roger LeLievre. He grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, in the shadow of the Sioux Locks, and is a very well-known Great Lakes photographer.
My grandparents had a cottage on the St. Mary's River, which connects Lake Superior with Lake Huron. And I watched the boats go by. My grandfather worked on the coal docks, putting fuel on the freighters, and he knew a lot of the ships and a lot of the captains. And he'd take me out in a little motorboat, and we'd go out and look at boats. And I got an interest, I think, that way.
I'm always curious about how and why the boats are stored the way they are. Here we see the Edwin H. Gott butted up to the American Courage. We'll next focus on the American Spirit, a 1,000-foot vessel or footer. It's actually 1,004 feet or 306 meters in length. Originally built as the George A. Stinson in Lorain, Ohio, it began service on the Great Lakes in 1978. In 2003, she came under the ownership of the American Steamship Company and was renamed the American Spirit. I think someone's a little late in taking down that Christmas tree. Alright, we're going to go back to Roger. On top of his photography, you may also know his name from the book that he publishes, Know Your Ships. LeLievre met the original publisher, Thomas Mance, as a child and developed a lifelong friendship, eventually taking over the printing of the book after Mance passed away in 1994.
Know Your Ships is essentially, it's a field guide to the ships that sail the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway. So think about a bird guide where you go out into the field and you identify various birds. Well, Know Your Ships lets you do that. This is what the book looks like.
March will mark the 66th publishing of the field guide. Real quick, I must say I find these tugs pretty interesting. Can anyone explain how the crew situation works on a boat like the Joyce Van Enkevort? I don't see much space for living quarters. Also, who all is in the bridge at the top? Are there more controls on the barges these connect to, or is everything run from the tug? This one was built in 1998 for the Van Enkevort Tug and Barge Company in Sturgeon Bay. She's paired with the Great Lakes Trader Barge. If you want to know more about a boat, Know Your Ships has information on the lake freighters, tugboats like this, barges, and passenger ships. There's even a section on saltwater vessels.
So if you see a boat going by, you can look it up in the index. Oh, here's the Paul R. Tregurtha. It's the biggest boat on the lakes. So you can find out that it's owned by the Interlake Steamship Company, and it's a self-unloader built in 1981. It has a diesel engine. It carries 68,000 tons of cargo. It's over 1,000 feet long and 105 feet wide. And also it was built by the American Shipbuilding Company, and it was previously named the William J. Delancey.
Next up, we'll look at the Edwin H. Gott, another 1,000-footer. Just like the American Courage, it too is 1,004 feet or 306 meters in length. Now this was built in 1979 in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin for the U.S. Steel Corporation. It was named after former U.S. Steel CEO Edwin H. Gott and has kept the name ever since. One unique fact is that it originally had a shuttle-style unloader similar to what the Stuart J. Court has. During the 1996 winter layup, it was fitted with a traditional boom, 280 feet or 85 meters in length. It's actually the longest on the Great Lakes. Well, back to Roger. He tells me a favorite part of the book is a section called Spotlight. It's a place for tales from the Great Lakes.
You might find a story about sailors, about ships. Here's the J.W. Westcott mailboat in Detroit is 150 years old this year. And I did a story on the Westcott.
Now we're looking at the Arthur M. Anderson closest to us and a little bit to the left. The Philip R. Clarke is in the middle, and then the Clyde Van Enkevort and the Erie Trader Tug and Barge are in the back. Now that's the CSX Torco dock in the background, along with several river barges on the right. The 740-foot or 225-meter Erie Trader was built in 2012, while the Clyde was built a year prior. Now, before being purchased by Van Enkevort in 2017, it was named the Lakes Contender. Now, the Clyde started off life as the Ken Booth Sr., and if you look closely, you can see the names still on the vessels, just painted over. The Know Your Ships book also features pictures from pro and amateur photographers across the Great Lakes, not just here in Lake Erie where I'm focusing.
If you happen to catch a good one on a nice day, send it in. I can't be everywhere on the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway, so I rely on people to send photos in, and perhaps I might get 800 or 900 pictures to come in my way, and I sort through them all, and they're not all professionals. Some cameras on your cell phone are pretty darn good these days. A lot of people have drones, so a lot of drone pictures coming in, but send them in, because if you don't send them in, I can't publish them.
Next, we'll talk about two historic vessels, the Philip R. Clarke and the Arthur M. Anderson. The Clarke was built in 1952 in Lorain, Ohio for U.S. Steel. Designated a AAA or Pittsburgh-class ship, she was originally 647 feet or 193 meters long before being lengthened to 767 feet or 233 meters. The boat was the first of 8 AAA-class vessels. Her neighbor, the Arthur M. Anderson, was also completed in 1952 in Lorain and was the second AAA boat. She was also lengthened to 767 feet or 233 meters. The Anderson is arguably most well known for being the last ship to be in contact with the Edmund Fitzgerald before it sank in November 10th of 1975. The Anderson was also the first boat to search for the crew of the Fitzgerald. Both the Anderson and Clarke were converted to self-unloaders in 1982. The Anderson is one of the most sought-after boats when it comes to photographers and Great Lakes enthusiasts. I'm a big fan as well. I love these pilot house forward boats. Whether it's the Anderson or other vessels on the Great Lakes, Roger says boat photography has just grown exponentially over the years.
When I was a kid in the 70s up in Sault Ste. Marie by the locks, I might have been the only person standing there on the shore taking a picture of a boat. Now you elbow this guy, elbow that guy. Boats have Facebook pages. There's a whole group of people called the boat nerds that follow the ships, and I think it's kind of came about because of social media. That kind of what changed it. So when I was a kid, for example, there were maybe 300 or 400 ships sailing the Great Lakes. Now there's maybe 100. So there's fewer boats, but there's far more people who are interested in them, and they can give you their stats, and they know who the captain is. It's kind of like NASCAR on the water. You know the captain, the driver, the sponsor, the owner. You might know people who are in the crew, the pit crew. You know how much cargo they've carried as a record. You know all those details and stats. If you know that, you're a boat nerd.
That's Toledo in the distance, and soon we'll see the American Valor. She's been in long-term layup here since 2008. Originally named the Armco and built in Lorraine in 1953, it's also a Pittsburgh-class vessel and is identical to the Anderson and the Clarke. If I read her history correctly, she still has her original steam power plant. Sadly, unless something changes, I don't think she'll ever sail again. I hate to see these historic vessels wither and die like this. I asked Roger what he thinks it is about boats that people find so fascinating.
I think people find the fascination in it's a world they're not very familiar with, but it sounds pretty romantic sometimes. I've always pondered, where's that ship going? Where did it come from? Who's on it? What are they doing? You see a ship go by in the evening and the lights are shimmering, and maybe you see some guys out on deck, and who are those people? And that's kind of what it is for me. It's, growing up by the boats feel like family to me. And I think my interest is an extension of that feeling. And I think other people feel that way too.
That's it for our conversation with Roger. I really appreciate him speaking with me, and I hope you enjoyed it too. I'll include a link to Know Your Ship so that you can check that out as well. Now you'll hear more from him in an upcoming video on the first 1,000-footer on the Great Lakes, and you'll learn why at one point it had the nickname Stubby. Alright, well, we've still got plenty more ships to check out. I really don't think even the drone does a good job of showing just how massive these boats are. This is the John G. Munson closest to us, and then the American Courage in the river. We'll start with the Munson. This 666-foot or 202-meter vessel was built in 1951 in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Like other similar vessels, she was eventually lengthened to 768 feet or 234 meters. She looks to be getting a new coat of paint, which I'm surprised they'd be able to do given how cold it's been in the area. She also looks like she's getting new blades on her propeller. Even her anchor got a new coat of paint. A battery change later, and we're now checking out the American Courage. This boat was built in 1979 in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. It's 635 feet or 193 meters in length. Parked between the two vessels is the tug Anne Marie, built as the Raleigh Anne in 1976. These tugboats really are incredible how powerful they are in such a small frame. It's a day later and we're off to Cleveland to check out the historic Alpena. She was originally built as the Leon Fraser in 1942 in Ecorse, Michigan. The 639-foot or 195-meter ship was built to carry iron ore. After serving on the Great Lakes for 4 decades, she was placed into storage in 1982. 7 years later, and it was purchased by Fraser Shipyards and shortened by 120 feet or 37 meters. She was also converted to a self-unloading cement carrier. A year later, she was sold again and renamed the Alpena. She's the oldest active ship on the Great Lakes. I think she's one of the most beautiful ships I've seen. I hope she has many more years of service out here on the Great Lakes. Alright, on to our next stop, the docks in Ashtabula. This is only my second time here, and both times were during the heart of winter. Lake Erie looks like a giant abyss. Here we get a lay of the land. You can see several ships off in the distance, but we also find several more near us. Closest to us we have another historic vessel, the Cuyahoga. Built a year after the Alpena in 1943, the J. Burton Ayres, as she was originally named, was 620 feet or 189 meters in length. She was renamed the Cuyahoga in 1995. Unfortunately, she's had a string of bad luck which may have ended her career on the Great Lakes. In May of 2023, she suffered a fire in the engine room. She was eventually towed here to Ashtabula for repairs. She returned to service in October of that same year. However, shortly after I caught her here in 2024, she caught fire once more. Her conveyor belt on the self-unloading boom burned during the incident. Right now, her future's up in the air, and I've got my fingers crossed she will sail again. Next to her is the Menominee Barge, originally launched in 1952 as the Sparrow's Point. Now this boat started life in Sparrows Point, Maryland at 626 feet or 190 meters in length. She was lengthened 72 feet or 22 meters a few years later. Several owners later, and the vessel was converted to the barge we see today in 2006. The Menominee's tug, the Olive Moor, is east of here in Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm not sure why they would split the two, but I guess it's not that far when it's time to head out for service at the end of the layup. Ahead of the Menominee, we find the tug Defiance and the barge Ashtabula. Now, the barge and tug were both built in 1982 and paired from the get-go. The barge being built in Sturgeon Bay, while the tug was built in Marinette, Wisconsin. Notice those unique cargo hatches on the Ashtabula. I've never seen openings like that on any other vessel. Here we find the tug New York. It was built in 1913 in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm not sure, but her name may have been changed to the Utah. She's based here in Ashtabula and provides docking services for the port. Next up we have the Sam Loud. She was built in 1975 in Sturgeon Bay. Now this is the first of 4 river-class sister ships, including the American Courage, American Republic, and Buffalo. She's 634 feet or 193 meters in length. The Calumet is the last ship in this berth. The 630-foot or 192-meter vessel was built in Lorain, Ohio and launched in 1973. Now she was part of a trio of boats, the other two being the Manitowoc, which we'll see in a minute, and the Robert S. Pearson, which is in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada. Now we're on to the other boats here in Ashtabula. We've got 2 big boys in the distance, the Indiana Harbor on the left and the American Integrity on the right. Now both are 1,000-foot or 304-meter vessels. The two are identical, built in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. The American Integrity was finished in 1979 and the Indiana Harbor a year later. It's amazing to me these massive boats are able to float and that they're nearly 50 years old. I will say they certainly don't have the character of the older vessels that we've seen. In the other dock, we find the tug Invincible, the Manitowoc in front of her, and the H. Lee White on the right. Now, the Invincible began life in 1979 as the R.W. Sessler. She was built in Fort George Island, Florida. Most recently, she worked with the McKee Sons barge, but that was laid up in 2014. The Invincible was laid up in Sturgeon Bay starting in 2014 as well. 4 years later, she was towed here to Ashtabula, where she's remained. Plans were to have her work with the Ashtabula barge, but that's been put on hold, and now I don't know what her fate will be. The H. Lee White was built in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin in 1974. It's 704 feet or 214 meters in length. And next to the White is the Manitowoc. She's a sister ship of the Calumet that we saw earlier. She's 630 feet or 192 meters in length and was built in 1973. Alright, well that does it for a stop in Ashtabula. I need to come here in the summer because I don't think that the winter icescape does this area justice. Does anyone know how busy the rail or boat traffic is here? It looks like there used to be a lot of heavy industry. I decided to add a bonus stop to our trip. We're actually in Conneaut, Ohio right now. This is just a short drive up from Ashtabula, and behind me is the Roger Blough. I figured it was worth the trip up here just because I don't know if that will ever set sail on the Great Lakes again, so let's go take a look. Here's a little about our final boat, the Roger Blough. It was built on Lake Erie in Lorain, Ohio in 1972 for U.S. Steel. One thing you'll notice about the vessel, it does not have a traditional self-unloading boom like nearly all the other boats we've seen. This features a shuttle type unloading boom mounted at the rear of the ship. It's only able to extend about 50 feet or 15 meters on either side of the boat. Because of that system, it's only capable of unloading into small hoppers on a dock. I know that includes here in Conneaut and Gary, Indiana. If you know of any other locations with those hoppers, do let me know in the comments. Now, she was also the last U.S. boat to be built in my favorite style of pilot house forward. I think she's a beautiful vessel. Taking a look around, can anyone share on what type of activity goes on here in Conneaut? I saw some taconite being moved, but didn't see much else. I'd love to hear more about this place. Well, that does it for this video. I sure do hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to record. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the boats that we've seen, as well as if you have a favorite out there on the Great Lakes. Now, if you missed my video from last winter's layup, I'll put a link to that in the description. That one focuses on more of the shipping and the impact that the Great Lakes have on this region. Until our next trip, I hope you have a great day.